Let's talk about why you should never look at the other stand-up comedians as your competition. What's up, everybody? Rivera here, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. Welcome to yet another Comedy Tip Tuesday. Today I want to talk about competition in stand-up and how it is two comics completely lost my respect one night, and it was because of their competition mindset. Here's the first thing I want to say. In my opinion, there really is no competition for me in stand-up outside of myself. For me, stand-up is a solo sport, so the only one that I would ever really have to compete with is me and what I've already done. So there's that. As far as competitions go, like comedy competitions like World Series of Comedy or some of the others, I've won several competitions, and I realized that in those instances I am technically competing against the other comics, but I still don't see them as competition. And that's probably why I end up winning a lot of things. Not that I'm really into doing competitions anymore, just because I feel like I'm past that in my career. But I do feel like in those instances, I've usually won because I don't really see them as competitions. I see them as I have to have the best set I can possibly have. I completely relax because, as I've told you guys before, I usually think of it as I can't win anyway, so I might as well just have the best set I can possibly have. And that's what ends up winning me the competition. But some comics always see it as they have to be better than the other comics. They have to get more laughs than the other comics. They have to match the other comics' energy. And it's really not like that at all. And I do say this with a lot of experience because I usually take people on the road with me that are more animated, that give more energy. And I do that because I actually want to follow that. I actually want to work kind of against that, you could say, because my style is more what you would call stand to deliver. I just deliver the joke and stand in one spot. I will move around a bit, but I'm not animated. And a lot of the people that I bring along are animated. I like following them. I like changing that energy. I like actually having to think about how I'm going to do that. And I have different tactics that I employ. And I don't mind talking about that on another video. But what I'm talking about at this point is that some people really do think this way. And I'm going to mention Trixx, who I've talked about. Trixx, a comedian, before. He tried to steal one of my jokes. Well, a couple parts of a joke at one point. And I don't respect him as a comic, but back then we were still friends. I lost respect for him as a comic on that particular day. Also, I lost respect for the other comic. I don't dislike the other comic. Technically, at this point, I don't dislike Trixx. I feel bad for him because Trixx is always trying to find the easy way out. That's why I don't respect Trixx as a person. But as far as losing respect for Trixx as a comic, that happened several months before we stopped being friends. And keep in mind, none of this comes from a malicious place. Like I said, I really don't care either way about Trixx at this point. It is what it is. Our situation was what it was. And if I ever decide to go through it in detail again, I'll definitely do that. But for now, I just want to talk about this particular subject and why I think competition kind of destroyed both of them on this particular night and made me not respect them. Before we go any further, like the video, comment, and subscribe. If you don't know what to comment and you want to leave a comment, just leave a tooth emoji. I have a flipper. It's the reason I talk funny. Leave the tooth emoji if you want to leave a comment but don't know what to put. Jack-o'-lantern works too. Have fun. Enjoy the video. Like, comment, subscribe. So what happened was, it was a late night show at the LA Comedy Club. A comedian here in Las Vegas by the name of Jimmy McMurrin was running these late night shows. He had this flyer that had Jason Cheny, who's a comic you may have heard of. He's kind of blowing up on Instagram right now. And then also Trixx. And they were the two featured comics on the flyer. So I go that night just to go watch, just to go be supportive. I was friends with Jimmy. I was friends with Trixx at the time. And I was friends with Jason Cheny. But what happened was, we get towards the end of the night and Jimmy McMurrin is out in the hallway, and so is Trixx and Jason Cheny. I'm just hanging out, not really thinking anything. You know, it wasn't like official show business or anything they were doing out there. They were just, as far as I knew, chatting. So then Jimmy McMurrin is like, okay, well, who's gonna go last? Who's gonna close out the show? And then it turns into this thing where Jason is like, I don't want to close out the show. And Trixx is like, I don't want to close out the show either. And then Jason's like, I don't want to follow you. And Trixx is like, I don't want to follow you either. And this is really happening, and it's right in front of me. And I'm just like, why don't these two bitches want to follow each other right now? We're in stand-up comedy. Shouldn't you both be able to follow each other? You're both supposed to be headliners. You both were featured on the flyer. I personally don't care who I follow. Trixx himself has featured for me before. I have not featured for Trixx because Trixx always requests that I do not feature for him. He'll even tell club owners he doesn't want me to feature for him because he doesn't feel he can follow me. I personally do feel just just on a comedic level, Trixx can follow me. Who knows whose jokes he's going to be doing, but he can definitely follow me. That's the way I feel about it, but he doesn't feel that way. There was even a time when I did him the favor of not requesting his weekend, which was my choice at the Laugh Factory, because I could have either featured for him or I could have featured for Steve McGrew. Steve Mudflap McGrew, if you don't know, I've known for years. I've worked with him before, and I knew he would be fine to follow me and he would have no problem with it. Steve McGrew really did just rock it like he's supposed to as a headliner the week that I worked for him. But I chose not to work for Trixx because I knew Trixx wouldn't want me to. Trixx has literally told me before, I don't want to follow you. Please don't request my weekend. Literally, that's what he told me. Even when I told him about the Laugh Factory situation, when I ended up featuring for Steve McGrew, I had mentioned to him I could have done your weekend or Steve McGrew, and he was like, please tell me you didn't pick my weekend. Literally, this is what happened. But for me, all of this at the time was just him being fun, cool, like, you know, kind of complimentary. I didn't realize that he seriously was like that and didn't like to follow other funny comedians because he always wants to seem like he's way better than he is, which comes from a place of competition, which comes from a place of ego, which is really going to do nothing for you. So anyway, back to this situation. They're going back and forth, and literally this went on for long enough that I got uncomfortable watching it because I was just like, why is this taking this long to figure it out? Now, comedically, Jason Cheny is more low energy and he has less experience than Trixx, and Trixx is a better performer. So naturally, to me, the way that it should have worked out was just Jason Cheny should have gone up in the feature spot, so right before the headliner, and then Trixx should have gone up and headlined it. That's the way I thought it naturally should have went. But these two are both afraid of each other or afraid to follow each other, so they're going back and forth. Jimmy McMurrin is sitting there as the producer of the show trying to accommodate both of them, which I understand Jimmy's position because Jimmy is newer to stand-up, so I can understand how he doesn't want to ruffle feathers with either one of the headliners that he's dealing with, and he's trying to treat them both with respect. But if I were Jimmy, I just would have said, this is the way the show is going, and I would have chose who's going to go up, and maybe Jimmy would have chose the opposite of what I would have chose, which would have been, like I said, Jason and then Trixx. Maybe Jimmy would have said it's going to be Trixx and then Jason. But whatever it was, as the producer of the show, I just would have said, this is the way it's going to go, and if you guys don't like it, then don't be on the show, and I'm not paying either of you motherfuckers, or I'm not paying whichever one of you doesn't actually want to do it. And so they both go inside for a second, I guess, to, I don't know, flip a coin or talk about it or trade tampons or whatever it is comics do when they're afraid to follow each other. And so they go inside and I look at Jimmy and I was like, this is turning into a thing. And he was like, I know. And he looked uncomfortable. And I was like, well, you're paying both of them, right? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, all right, well, why don't you do it this way? Why don't you give me both of their money and go ahead and put both of those motherfuckers before me in whatever order you want, and I'll headline the show. And Jimmy just started laughing and was like, yeah, I can't do that. But to me, that's what would have made the most sense, since obviously neither of them wanted to do the actual job. And like I said, for me, that is a matter of competition and ego, and both of them wanting to think that they have to be better than the other. You don't have to be better. You can be you. You can be different, and you can win the audience over in a different way, and it doesn't have to be a matter of being better. Now, am I better than both of those comics? 100%. Not a question in my mind or theirs. But do I think of it that way when I'm supposed to perform? No. I just know that whatever happens, I have to absolutely kill it for this audience, and that is my responsibility as a headliner. And if you're not ready to do that, then you're not ready to be a headliner. Long before I was even headlining, I worked for Joe Coy, and the way I got the job was I was working for Russell Peters. I was featuring. Joe Coy came in because he was promoting his comedy special on, I believe, Comedy Central at the time. Yeah, Comedy Central was who it was for. And he wanted to promote it because it had just gone on sale DVD. It ended up selling huge. But anyway, Joe Coy was supposed to go up right before me because he was doing a guest set and I was the feature. And me just being the way I am, I knew Joe Coy was a beast of a performer, but I also knew that I just had to do what was my position in the show. So if Russell Peters, who is the headliner, undeniably, is cool with putting Joe Coy up as the guest set and then having me still feature, then that's just what I have to do, no questions asked. That's what the job is. And I was much newer to stand up and I didn't have any say, just like if somebody were headlining over me now, I wouldn't have any say. way. Like, that's not my place. They tell me the way it's supposed to work. They're the headliner. They're the boss. So Russell Peters says, I'm going up after Joe Coy. I don't think anything about it. I'm just nervous because I do have to perform. And at that time, I used to get nervous. Now there's a lot less nerves involved, but then I was a lot newer. This was at the Brea Improv, and Joe Coy went up, and he was 100% Joe Coy. He did not pull any punches and absolutely rocked it. Undeniably a Joe Coy set, which if you're familiar with Joe Coy kills it. And so Joe Coy absolutely kills it. Then it's my turn to go up. I go up, completely fucking rock it from the beginning of my set to the end of my set. 100% rock it. I get off stage. I go to the green room. Joe Coy, who I had met before, was like, you're absolutely fucking amazing. I want you to feature for me. I give Joe Coy my number. A couple weeks later, I'm working for Joe Coy, and a year and a half later, I stopped working for Joe Coy. But we had an amazing year and a half. I learned a lot of stuff, and it was all because I never got into a competition mindset with Joe Coy. From that first night at the Brea Improv when I was working for Russell Peters, I never felt like I had to be better than Joe Coy. I just knew that I had to destroy that set. I had to do as well as I possibly could do. So like I said, the only competition happening in my head is between me and myself last night, me and myself last week, me and myself a year ago. That is the only competition happening at any point in my comedy career. And if you train yourself to think like that, you'll be much better off than the comedians that feel like, I have to be better than this person. You will naturally be better than them because while they're trying to compete with you, in your mind, they're not even a factor. You're just doing the best you can possibly do, and you're going to get the best result that you can possibly get because as a comedian, that's what the job is. So I hope this helped illuminate for you guys the way that I think about stand-up and gives you a different perspective on thinking of stand-up as a competition, because you're only going to ruin yourself that way. And I said I was going to talk about Trixx and why it was I thought he kind of ruins himself by thinking of things as competition and how he's always trying to take the easy way out. And to me, that's what that was, because naturally he just should have said, yeah, I should be headlining this show. And he could have said it in a complimentary way and not insulted Jason Cheny. He could have just been like, yeah, I don't mind closing out the show. That's what I would have done. There's some shows that it's just a no-brainer that I should headline them, and I'm not going to argue with anybody or complain. I mean, yeah, sometimes I would like to get out a little earlier or whatever. Sometimes comedians have ego, and they'll be like, yeah, I want to close out the show. As long as my money doesn't change, I don't care what position I go up in. So, once again, this has been Ty Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world.